Hello, and welcome to the Raised Beaches podcast, a podcast about paleoclimate and global change. I'm Dr. Evan James Gowan, but you can call me Evan. This is episode 4 of the Raised Beaches podcast, and I'm recording this on December 25th. And as a result, Merry Christmas. This will definitely come out after Christmas, but I hope everybody had an enjoyable 2024. This episode, the deep dive, is going to be on the topic of Milankovitch cycles, which is one of the fundamental things that controls paleoclimate. So I hope you enjoy that. Of course, I would have liked to have made this episode a little bit more, a little bit earlier than this. My last episode was in early November, and one of the reasons it's taken a bit of time is that I've been working on a new reconstruction of the Eurasian ice sheets using a margin chronology known as dated 2. And this is being worked on by a number of colleagues, but it's led by Dr. Anna Hughes in University of Manchester. And I play a very minor role in this study and to make the reconstructions. Deducing where the margin of the ice sheets were in the past is a complicated thing. You have to take into account the ages of indicators when the ice was gone, as well as the geomorphic indicators of the ice sheet geometry. So I've been working on that since October, actually, and I've made headway, of course, but hopefully by the middle of January, I'll have this mostly finished working, and I will be able to focus on this podcast a little bit more than I was in the past 2 months. Since my last podcast, there's been a few things that have happened. Number one thing is the autumn in Japan is came very late this year, and as a result, in the first weekend of November, my wife and I went to Okinawa to hit the beach, and the weather was absolutely perfect for that. And of course, when I go to the beach, I'm always interested in the geology, and specifically the geology related to sea level changes. And we were in this town called Yomitan, and in Okinawa, the main indicator of past sea level changes is a type of rock known as a beachrock. And beach rocks are all around Okinawa, and it's created by a process known as, or it's basically a cement where organisms secrete this chemical known as urea, which is the same chemical you find in your urine, and basically it cements all this material together. So if you look at the beach rock, it's full of coral and shell fossils, and this beach rock will form within a certain range of sea levels, so you can use that to infer the past sea level position if you measure the elevation of these beach rocks. And this beach rock, since it's basically a cement, has been used as a building material in Okinawa. And of course, I decided, has anybody investigated this to determine the past sea level in Okinawa? And the answer to that is yes. In 2019, a paper came out by Evelpido et al., and they went to all these beach rocks and measured their elevation, and also found the ages of them, and based on the analysis of the elevation or relative to mean sea level, they were able to deduce the past sea level changes, and coupling that with tidal notches, which are basically erosional features in rocks that are along the coastline, they were able to infer that in the past 5,000 years or so, there's been a drop of between 1 and 3 meters of sea level in Okinawa. And of course, I like to model sea levels, so I took those data and calculated sea level using my model PaleoMist to figure out what is the sea level change just due to glacial isostatic adjustment processes. And my model suggests that the sea level is pretty flat. So if that's correct, then it's possible that this change in sea level is a result of tectonics, which might make sense because Okinawa is located near a subduction zone. However, that could be wrong. My model could easily be wrong. So, as I mentioned in previous episodes, ocean siphoning is also a major reason why the sea level has dropped during the later part of the Holocene, and that could also be affecting the sea level in Okinawa. But right now, in terms of my own modeling, it's very preliminary. So I would not rule out that kind of process being responsible for this drop in sea level. And yeah, if you look at the tidal notches, there has definitely been a drop in sea level in Okinawa. So yeah, and yeah, Evilpedo et al. Also suggested that different parts of the island have a different magnitude of fall at sea level. So that also probably points towards a tectonic component to the sea level change. But at any rate, having 1 to 3 meters of sea level change over 5,000 years, in terms of tectonics, that's fairly moderate rate. So the second thing that occupied my time recently is a friend of mine from Germany came to visit me, and in Kumamoto, and I always like to take my guests to my favorite place, a viewpoint known as Daikambo. And what Daikambo is that in the center of Kyushu Island, there's a large caldera known as the Aso Caldera. And this caldera, which is basically a big bowl-shaped feature in the middle of the island, which formed after the eruption of a major volcanic eruption. Basically, this is one of the major features of the island. And Daikambo, you're basically at the top of this caldera, and you're looking down into the caldera, and it's absolutely wonderful to see, because if you're inside the caldera, it looks like you're surrounded by mountains, but actually you are inside of a big bowl, basically. So the Aso Caldera formed in 4 major eruptions, and the largest happened about 80,000 years ago, and that was probably the second largest eruption in the past 100,000 years. Nevertheless, the volcanic activity continues to this day, and there is a volcano in the middle of this caldera, and it occasionally erupts. It hasn't for a few years, but if you go there's steam coming out all the time. So that's one of the fun things to see in Kumamoto if you come to visit here. And another thing, like I said, the autumn has come quite late. Like it's December 25th right now, and there's still leaves on the trees, and usually they're fallen by the beginning of December, and this is caused by the fact that the ocean surface temperatures around Japan are quite warm, and there was a news program that I watched in November, and there was a blob of water in northern Honshu, so sort of northern Japan, which was 6 degrees warmer than normal. And one of the consequences of this, because it is part of a longer term warming trend due to global warming, is that fish and other marine creatures are moving northwards. And in this program, they were talking about this really expensive crustacean, which they called a ise ebi, which in English it's known as a spiny lobster. Ebi in Japanese means a shrimp or a prawn, and yeah, I'd say it looks more like a really big prawn because it doesn't have the claws. But yeah, the meat ise is a very famous shrine in sort of near Nagoya, and yeah, it's called the Ise Ebi because they fished these crustaceans near this famous shrine. But now they're catching them in northern Japan, so they've sort of moved northwards, and they've become rare around Ise. And there's other tropical fish that they're starting to find in northern Japan. They're moving northwards, and in this program they also discussed that some of the fish that they're catching are dead because the water is too warm for the fish to survive. And this is a really major issue in Japan because of course they love to eat fish here, and the movement of fish to different habitats in different regions is one that they're having to deal with because it's happening very quickly. And the final interesting geologically related thing that I saw was Kumamoto University, where I have an affiliation, had a fossil exhibit for ammonites. So ammonites were a sort of a shellfish that lived in the water during the Cretaceous and Jurassic, and they went extinct 66 million years ago during the major die-off when the meteor asteroid hit Mexico at that time. And so these fossils are one of the most ubiquitous of fossils that you'll find in rocks, around Amakusa, which is very close to Kumamoto City. So they have a lot of these fossils. They're also found in Hokkaido. So there's a researcher at Kumamoto University who studies these. And some of these shells, like a typical ammonite fossil, you'll find it has a circular shell, but some of these have just crazy randomly shaped shells, and so they're very interesting, and some of them are quite big. Like they had one fossil that was about 1 meter wide, and I read that there's some ammonite fossils that are much larger. And I was told that in Japan, ammonites are synonymous with fossils. So like even in Pokemon, the fossils look like ammonites. So that was interesting. I love looking at fossils. When I was a kid, I loved fossils and I collected them, and so I always enjoy looking at the fossils. And anyway, since it's the end of the year, I thought I would give a little bit of an overview of my busy year. So Yeah, at the start of the year, I was in Victoria, and one of the cool things I did in Victoria, which is in Canada, is I visited where I did my master's degree. And in some ways, it was kind of weird because not much had changed since I finished my master's degree, which was, I think, 18 years ago. So there was even a poster that had everybody who was working there, and I was on it. And so I had a good chuckle about that. And in February, I ran in a marathon, and I was training quite hard for that. And I also went to Seoul just for a fun trip. And in March, I went to Sapporo, and I met with Ralph Greva, who's the author of the Psychopolis ice sheet model. So we're working together to do some ice sheet modeling, which hopefully I will finish early next year. And in May, I went to the Philippines, and that was kind of a vacation, but also got to see some nice coral reefs there. I went to Kobe, and I was visiting some of my friends from Canada who were staying there, and we went up the Roko Mountains. So Kobe, it's a really big city, but it's interesting because there's a literal mountain range that splits Kobe into two. So you can walk over this mountain range, which we did, and you go from one side of Kobe to the other. And there's of course a subway that connects the two sides of the city. And of course, I went to the Japan Geoscience Union conference, which I talked about in episode 1. So I always love that conference. It's a lot of fun. In June, I went to Canada, and I went to Buffalo, and I talked about Buffalo a little bit in episode 1 as well, where basically I was invited to discuss ice sheets and sea level there. And I was invited by Jason Briner, who's a very well-known geologist who studies the evolution of the Greenland ice sheet. In July, I went to Kikaijima. I was teaching in the summer school and investigating the sea level changes that can be deduced from the corals. In August, I went to Tsushima and Nagasaki, and I got to see some of the northernmost tropical corals that you can find there. In October, I also went to a different part of Nagasaki, and yeah, I discussed that as well, and how you could deduce some of the sea level changes there. And yeah, I already discussed my Okinawa trip, and yeah, one of the overarching things about this year is, despite being so busy, I am searching for a job, and I had one job offer, and I turned it down because it would require me to move to another country, and I decided, I'm getting too old to move around the world like that. So I'm looking for a bit more stability. And I did have an interview here in Japan, but it didn't pan out. And, it's sort of how it goes. And they're looking for something that maybe I can't fulfill what they're looking for. And of course that happens. But next year, I should be starting some lecturing at one of the local universities. So things are looking up for 2025 in terms of my job situation. And hopefully that builds up to something larger. And yeah, I expect in 2025, I will also make at least one trip to Kikaijima. And yeah, I probably won't do so much traveling in 2025. And, I think that's fine because I did so much traveling this year. And anyway, that is what's happened for me this year, and I had a good time, and I will hopefully. Oh yeah, the last thing. My Christmas present this year is that this paper, which I submitted on Christmas Day last year, was accepted for publication. So I'll be discussing that in an upcoming episode. So, and with that, this introduction is over.